All right, cool, man.
Hi, Coach. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Most importantly, thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for being my brother.
Likewise. Like we were just talking about with what's going on this year, or I guess what's going on present day. You mentioned the hurricane, and I guess I didn't. That's hurricane. Is it Helene, or how do you say it?
Helena, yep,
Helene.
Helene,
Gotcha.
Helena, yep.
Yeah, it seemed to hit kind of ground zero, where luckily I got out of there in time, but then coming back through to see what the damage was basically from South Georgia all the way up to East East Georgia up to North Carolina, Tennessee area.
hmm hmm
And when you mentioned it, it reminds me how much in touch you try and stay with what's going on within the states and around the world, to where like thinking, oh, you're in Arizona, I didn't think that you'd be affected by it, or kind of paying attention to it.
hmm hmm Yeah, no, I believe that, one of the, and I said this last time during Hurricane Katrina. I was working for the newspaper back then,
Mm.
and when Hurricane Katrina happened, I mean, it tore some stuff up and it devastated and it dislocated a lot of people. And I was moved. God then moved me, my heart, to do something as a community and working for the newspaper. You already know, like once you work for the newspaper, you just got to say it to the editors and say it to the chief of staff, and it gets out. So they were a wonderful contribution in helping my boss Larry back then, myself, as well as my mother-in-law. We took a wonderful entrepreneur in our community, donated a huge truck. We filled that thing up in a week and drove
Mm.
that out there. It took us 4 days to drive all the way out to the south end of Texas and drop that off at a hub, and then come back. So it was a organized and well given community that came together. Fast forward to today, we have seen a week has gone by, and if not almost 1 or 2 weeks now,
Yeah.
and we are seeing a massive pushback. We are seeing a lack of that genuine heart where we need to be as a people. And so, and I don't know, Ashley. I don't know if it's, again, I don't know if everybody that follows and listens and hears, your podcast, that are, if how many are believers and how many are not believers. But,
Mhm.
I say that in respects to, you know, Martin Luther King once said, the most persistent and urgent question ever asked is, what have you done for others?
Mhm.
And that goes down the lines as what the Bible expressed and what the great word expressed, and throughout even all the great teachers of old is loving one another. And the
Right.
great commission, love one another, love thy neighbor as thyself. Well, how can I say I love my countrymen? How can I say so? All these things just kind of, like, again, like I say, you might not be a believer in that, and that's fine. No disrespect, but that's again what God was really pressing upon my heart. This
Mhm.
sense of in enlightenment. Like, you can't call yourself a leader. You can't call yourself an executive. You can't call yourself anything
Mhm.
if you're not serving something greater than yourself.
Right.
So I've been working for the last week, getting connected with people.
Mhm.
Finally, yesterday, I literally got emotional because I was just so frustrated with and I'm not making this a political thing, but it is frustrating when the local governments and federal governments are not doing what they should be doing. And again, that
Right.
goes back to leadership. Everything starts from the top. Everything starts from the top. So, it's been a week, and when I think about what that question was, how are things on this end,
Yeah.
this chapter of my life here in Arizona, we are affected. We should all feel that empathy. We should all feel that compassion toward our fellow man here in this country. We don't know. Again, here I am sipping Dunkin' Donuts coffee. They don't have a Dunkin' Donuts coffee. When
Mhm.
I asked, when I got word yesterday from talking to some individuals yesterday that are they're making headway towards that area, another
Mhm.
entrepreneur who has a moving company, we have to take all of our supplies, take it down to Phoenix, Arizona, which is a 4 or 5 hour drive.
Mhm.
All the capital that comes in, all the capital, all the money, all the capital will be going to Sam's Club and to our local Home Depot. They will
Mhm.
get supplies, and then they will send it to the hub. closest to that devastation to that surrounding area,
Hmm.
and those distribution centers will take everything over there. So, I mean, we are working diligently, being a Rotarian, being a part of our community. It's been a wonderful experience again, and just making move. And it's never about I, it's always about we. And that's one
Hmm.
of the most important things that we must understand as leaders. It's about what we can do as a you know as a people of this country, not black, white, yellow, green. It's about blood,
Yeah,
heartbeat, mindset. So that's what we've been doing, man, on the side here.
that's awesome. And I think something I can speak to on the positive end, it's like, of course, you'll have people looking out for themselves, but it's been amazing to see what's changed in a week because literally the hurricane touched down, I think, last Thursday night, Friday
Hmm.
morning for a
Hmm.
lot of
Hmm.
people, basically from like 11 p.m. to 4 as it just traveled down its
Yeah.
path.
Yeah.
And it knocked out a lot of things, took down a lot of trees, houses
Yeah.
were affected, power lines and things like that. Just driving south, you could see just the wake and the destruction, but very quickly you see how people get up and go. They respond and they get to, like, people got out with chainsaws, they cut,
Yep.
cleared
Yeah.
pathways where like trees were along the road, like within a day, that at least had a lane clear. And coming back a week
Hmm.
later, it's like power's just come on for a lot of areas. People are
Yeah.
getting water back, and it's like
Yeah.
there there are a lot of people where it's like the you get to know your neighbors and like people are looking in for each other.
Yeah.
Like down
Yeah.
at work where I'm at, it's
Hmm.
like people have called each other and been like, hey, how are you doing here? How are you doing there? Do you need a
Right.
generator? Let me go
Right.
with you. And then you have
Right.
other people that are kind of like sneaky, just like, oh, y'all
Hmm.
look like you need some help. And it's like they're not really
Hmm.
intended to
Right.
give you any help. But
Man, that's scary. It is. And when, in
yeah,
fact, touching on that area is, I think that so much of where and I used this earlier when we were discussing the disconnection
yeah,
is, yesterday we had an event here in our community and I put out a jar. I mean, I don't think that enough people, and there were close to a little over 1,000 people, community members that came out, and there's a different organizations, a whole block party,
yeah,
and it's there's a sense of disappointment,
mm,
and it's disappointment in what we've allowed ourselves to
yeah,
become. Not the disappointment in the industry of technology. It's not their fault
yeah,
to some degree, but for the majority, it's us as self-control, self-managers, our business.
yeah,
And so, it's just, yeah, man, seeing people that are so disconnected from the reality. And I think back to myself is, what if this were to happen in your community? What if
mm,
this were to happen right now? What if our dam broke? How many people would be displaced? How many people would never make it out? How much, money would be lost because of, our homes being so close to this huge river?
right,
So yeah, man, it's sad, and I'm desperately wanting to help. And if I have to take off 2 weeks just to drive a rig out there, then so be it. But that's the sacrifice that you make in order to help your fellow man. So yeah,
yeah,
that's what we're doing.
awesome. And I guess for anyone who doesn't know, who do you say you are?
Say that one more time, brother. You broke up a little bit.
I said, for anyone who doesn't know who you are, who do you say you are?
Coach Frank Sagasta. I am the brand. I am the man. I am the person. That's all I can be. I
Right.
can't be anything else. That's right.
And I didn't know you were into news before. Like, how did you get into that and how did you transition over into education?
So I worked for the newspaper for just a minute. After I left education, uh, I wouldn't even say I left education. Education doesn't leave you. And I
Mm,
and I, and I ask you guys' forgiveness for saying that, because education doesn't ever leave you. But I was working for a school, and I'm still good friends with each and every single person that fired me. That's
mm,
exactly what they did. They fired me, and the reason why they fired me is because I was growing in a different direction.
mm,
I found, a mentor, a teacher by the name of Dr. Eric Thomas that you and I both know, and many other of your followers and listeners know who he is. He's the hip hop preacher. But
mm,
I had been scrolling through YouTube. I'd been going through some things, and God just put him. in front of my eyes, in front of my ears, in front of my conscious and subconscious mind. And I started growing. I started attending different conferences, and then of course I he was on a show with this dude that's into real estate, and I started listening to him, and I was
Mhm.
like, so it was Grant Cardone. I was listening to Grant Cardone, like, so I started just getting connected with different mindsets and different industries and different voices, and I started growing. I never stopped growing, and even today, I got Teacher of the Month, and they asked me to share a little speech. And so in a quick 1 minute, it's like I give God all the glory. I
Mhm.
give my family, who has been my number one, my guinea pigs, as well as my number one supporters and my number one students.
Yeah.
They're my inspiration. That's the why in my life is my family. But I made it known to each and every single one of my colleagues the other day when I was awarded that opportunity, this gift, this position. I said, I have to give a lot of credit to each and every single one of the authors that have ever crossed my mind.
Mm.
Like we have in our home well over, uh, you know, 2,000 books in our home, and I've read three-quarters of them in the last decade, and
Mhm.
I'm thankful for every single one of them. Because as Mark Twain said, every new book is a friend,
Mm.
is a brand new friend,
Yeah.
and I respect that. So it was getting fired from this school, being with the newspaper for a minute, and then
Mhm.
getting a call to join a new school in our community that was just starting. And here we are. I've been there 7 years now,
Mm.
and we now have a high school that I am now teaching at. So I'm the
Mhm.
only staff member. I'm the only staff member teacher at this particular school called Desert Star Academy in Fort Mojave, Arizona, to work in the middle school teaching
Mhm.
leadership and life skills. First started off as a social studies teacher,
Right.
and then move over to elementary because we lost our PE teacher. So because I had prior experience,
Mhm.
and I'm a fitness guru, so I was like, okay, cool. So I went over there and worked for a year and a half.
Yeah.
And I left the middle school and went over there for a year and a half, made a huge impact. And when I say I made a huge impact, I'm not saying that to impress anybody, but to press upon you, the little ones, man. If you can get the hearts of the little ones, man, and you can inspire them and coach them up and train them up, man, you got leaders for life. You
Mhm.
got an impact for life. So, yeah, it's been a year and a half over there. Now I'm at the high school this year. This is my first year being back in the high school level, and I have two leadership classes
Mhm.
and one PE class, and I do have one leadership class at the middle school too. So a total combination of about 5 to 6 classes a day, 4 days a week, and yeah, just
Wow.
sharing different content, different material, decades of content that's been here, and yeah, man, that's where everything began for me. So yeah, working for the newspaper was an interesting journey, but at the end, it was just an experience. It's a
Yeah.
chapter.
That's
Hmm.
awesome. It's funny because you always come to mind when I think of or someone mentions like why didn't we learn this in school or like why don't they teach this? And I'm like, oh, I know somebody
Yeah.
that teaches this because it's
Yeah.
like you look at the
Hmm.
things that you end up using versus the intangibles where you're like you don't know anything about leadership, public
Oh
speaking, you don't
man.
know how money works, you don't know how like you kind of know how how your government or like community works kind of where we started, where it's talking about being able to be personable enough to care about the people that are
Hmm.
closest to you. Because it's like, even
Yeah.
if it's your enemy, so to speak, like if you can't treat them well, don't be surprised when they're holding a knife to your back. And then you're
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
crap. Because
Yeah.
when it's a storm or something like that, you even see, of course, they're going to be the people that just kind of watch you and don't do anything to lend a hand. But then
Yeah.
in doing that, they kind of ostracize themselves. But at the same time, you see, like, I think the old analogy goes, if you're on the side of the road and you're pushing your car, like people would get out and they'll help you push because they're like, oh, this person's putting in some effort. They could usually use some help. And it's like, hey, let me see if I can help out. And then just small things go a long distance. And
All the way.
really, I think there's the negative, and then just last week for me, it was strange because it's like since moving. to South Georgia, like been familiarized with like a hurricane last year and two this year. And it's like thankfully being in a more flexible position and being like, okay, guys, like it's best that we don't come into work tomorrow because we don't know what the
Right.
storm's going to do, hunker down.
Yep.
So it's
Yep.
like if it could get out of town, I got out of town and kind of got out of the way. And then when you there's something to be said about like having that quiet peace and that
Yeah.
stillness within, where I think it kind of goes back to the book of Isaiah. It's either Isaiah or Elijah when he did the event at Mount Carmel, and then you have
Hmm.
the queen that's coming after him because he basically killed all her priests, and they're just like,
Hmm.
"We're coming for your head." And instead of expecting God to be like this massive thing, to be like, "Hey, I'm going to take care of everything," it's like, no,
Right.
it's
Right.
this calm, quiet voice that says like it's going to be okay. And like
Hmm.
in other people's chaos, it's like it may not be my turn yet, but being able to have a level head or not be caught up in the goings on. It's like, okay, like maybe this is an example, or this is like a vision of things to come in the future. And who knows what that means or what that looks like, but just seeing the experience of like hurricanes coming through over the last 2 years and
Hmm.
seeing how people responded to it, at least in the positive, to where it's like you
Yeah.
control what you can control, and then the people
That's
that
right.
do like the line work, the blue collar work, it's like that's a good reason why I'm like, oh, that's why I like working with these guys, because when it comes down to it, it's like people might thank you for a minute or they might not remember you until their power goes out or they need you to come fix this or fix that. But it's like
Yep.
all those guys, they got up and they showed up and they're continuing to show up. Like driving to where I'm at now, it's like I saw maybe 10 to 20 bucket trucks like that
Wow.
that were they're either going to the next location or maybe wrapping up for the day, or I'm
Yeah.
not sure,
Right.
but it
Right.
looked like
Right.
they were mobilizing kind of like at
Wow.
a train
Yeah.
center. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like that's why we do what we do.
That's
And
right.
even if
That's
it's
right.
not seen, like people will come through, they'll know that the roads are clear, this is done, that's
Hmm.
done. And it's like you give thanks for people like that. And those are the
Yes, sir.
workers.
Yep. Yeah. Those are the people putting in time. I'll circle back to, you know, the teaching of leadership. It's a concept,
Mhm.
and for the most part, most people, because and I mean never until the last if I had to give an actual genuine number, I would say right around 5 to 10 years ago, Cornell
Mhm.
University was one of the first universities to actually start bringing out executive leadership concepts.
Mhm.
And you can take the classes, and classes are, I would just say to some degree, they are semi affordable, but there are other universities now are starting to jump on that same bandwagon, I guess you might want to call it, or
Yeah.
limelight. And it's true, because if you don't understand how leadership genuinely works, whether it's the communication, the collaboration, the creativity, the critical thinking, the list goes on of different traits of leadership. If you don't know how to serve the the supreme, the all the I guess the pinnacle of what leadership is serving, being a servant leader, then it's going to be absolutely very, very hard as you enter life, as you enter any business or any industry or any organization or team. Having those qualities, having that value, I should say, that education and training is what definitely it does at the end of the day, it does bring better results.
Yeah.
It brings massive results. But when you don't have it, it brings devastation, it brings chaos, it brings dissatisfaction, and ineffective, productivity, and it's seen throughout the world as well as our country. We spend literally, I could shoot out numbers because I've done my homework for the last decade. I'm still a student. I'm still a scholar. I'm still a student of leadership. Will always be a student of leadership and communication until the
Mhm.
day I die, until God calls me home. But I've learned that this particular concept of leadership is something that's literally 1%, less than 1% of schools, high schools,
Yeah.
not middle schools, just high schools, do not have. They do not have in America.
Right.
And I always come back to the question, what's the long-term effect of not having it?
Hmm.
We're seeing it. We're living in it today, you know, and I can't stress that enough with parents. And it's and guardians, but parents and guardians, I can't stress that enough. Even with administrators, they want to say that math and English are the number one. Yes, you do need those, but I would beg to differ. You better put leadership right up there with them.
Yeah.
I know it may sound like an elective and it may sound like a concept that most people won't gravitate towards, but in the end, you'll need it. You'll
Yeah.
definitely need it. Yep.
That's very true. It's funny because I felt tested on a job and that I was on earlier in the week, and I had a conversation with my brother, I think a little bit after. But the things that kind of got me through the moment, so to speak, is remembering where I was, why I was there, and seeing
Mhm.
that like as a leader, you're tasked with solving problems at
That's
times.
it.
And it's
That's it.
that you may have like personnel differences, and instead of responding to the knee-jerk reaction of like, oh, like I don't want to deal
Hmm.
with this, like I shouldn't
Hmm.
be, this shouldn't be. And it's like it's the unideal things that you start thinking to yourself like, oh, there's got to be a better way to do this. And it's like, yeah, that
Right.
there is a better way, but it starts with you. So it's like I had to start with me and kind of calm my mind down to think of like, okay, what is it that I can control? And
Right.
I think I listened to a clip earlier where from Jocko Willink, and he was saying that as a leader, it's your job to kind of like corral the pack, but you can't get stuck in the pack mentality because if you
Yeah.
do,
I got that
then
book.
it's like you basically get lost
And
in
you
your
get lost.
position.
That's right. Yep.
So then it's like if this person's complaining about this, that person's complaining about that. I understand what the task is. So it's like, hey, let's do the task to the best of our ability. If you can do this, you do that. If you can do that, you do that. And it's like being able to take a step back, breathe, and pray. It's like, even my prayer was like, okay, thinking back to some of the things of counseling, it's been one of the things that's been ringing in my head this week.
Right.
And it's
Right. Right.
been whether I'm driving, whether I'm working, whether I'm doing anything, it's I forgive and I go free. So
That's
if
it.
someone cuts me off, I forgive them. If I get mad at somebody, I forgive myself for getting
Hmm.
mad. It's like I don't have to stay
Hmm.
mad. Like you got
Right. Right.
mad,
Right.
fine. But it's like you get to move on from that. You don't have to stay with the emotion. But it's like you can experience it and kind of be like, okay, well that happened. And it's like, okay, like if it keeps happening,
Yeah.
it's like let me back up. Let me
Yeah.
just watch. If somebody's doing donuts or whatnot in front of me, I'm like, okay, let me give you plenty of space. You do your donuts, and I'm just gonna go grab a
Hmm.
cup of coffee or just sit down for a minute because it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I don't need to get caught up in all that because
No.
all
No.
that's not gonna help
No.
me move forward.
No. I think one of the greatest tokens of my appreciation to God is looking through Proverbs and looking at the virtues of life in First Peter, and studying those. For the last 5 years, I've been studying really the five virtues of life.
Mhm.
For the last 14, almost 15 years, dedicated waking up and starting my day with reading Proverbs. One of the gurus, financial gurus, said three books you should learn to master and understand.
Mhm.
And the third book was the book of Proverbs. And it
Mhm.
brought me to this wonderful. If you guys want the other two books, the second book is actually money psychology, and the
Mhm.
first book was Think and Grow Rich. So it was just when he opened up with Proverbs, saying Proverbs happened to be one of the three books that most millionaires have read. It just made me think really hard about that millionaire mindset.
Yeah.
I know that for certain, my task, my purpose on this earth, when I see things like that, I always think back today, of being a student of psychology and sociology is that there's somebody going through something. And when that person is going to them, they lash out. They have a reaction, and I
Yeah.
might be their reaction. And I too sometimes might have a reaction, but I have to catch myself. As my wife says, "You got all these." And my wife is good. My wife is so she's like a professor. She's a professor. She will definitely if I react in any way, she said, "You got all these books." And boom, as soon as she says that, it's like a quick instant, like ice cold bucket of cold water just right in the face. Blow, you
Yeah.
know, and it's an instant boom. You're right. Let me change that real quick. You
Yeah.
know, it's like it's almost like a smack in the face,
Mhm.
and that's good. And so I always have to come back to that, and I'm so thankful what she does, it, even though I have to bite my tongue because I know she's right.
Mhm.
And the reason why I'm sharing this is because there are times that we go through in life experiences and moments in life, the challenges, the situations and struggles, and we are so, I guess, carnal minded to some degree, where we're so quick to just react instead of taking a step back and
Mhm.
responding to it in a positive way. And that's one thing I've learned from Napoleon Hill and W. Clement Stone is having a positive mindset. They
Yeah.
wrote a phenomenal book several years ago, and I've been a student of that for the last 10 years, is being that person on an everyday basis.
Yeah.
And if you can find that and then driving in other anecdotes such as the book of Proverbs or the seven keys to a successful life from Peter, which are
Mhm.
the virtues of life, it makes a lot more sense. You're able to you literally I've witnessed this for the 5 years of just following through on those to see how much of an impact it could actually make when things are going the opposite way than what you want. And I've always told my wife, and I still today, it's not your business. You are not the name owner of the school. When things are
Mhm.
going wrong and they're going sideways, we can fuss to one another,
Yeah.
but we do not globally fuss with other people. We do not discuss what might be we might be thinking among other people because
Mhm.
that is toxic. You and I, we can do it in the car all day long and make it very global in our small surrounding. That's fine. We're supposed to carry each other's burden.
Mhm.
That's fine. But we don't own the school. Until we open up our own school,
Mhm.
we're just employees. And so
Yeah.
you have to see it like that. Now you can make an impact as an employee, or you can make a devastation.
Yeah.
The decision and the choice is always up to us. So yeah, no, I definitely agree with what you're doing. I'm glad that you're actually to step back and kind of reflect on the situation and say, okay, I need to change this before I react versus respond.
But
That's
I
good.
think thank you. I think in order for me to do that, something had to click. And I listened to this message from Miles Monroe about the difference between knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. And it's like knowledge is like just things that you have, but it's like you might learn something or you might be given something.
That's in this book.
Oh, it is. Gotcha.
That's in this one.
Yeah, yeah, that
Living with
makes
purpose.
sense. But
Yeah.
it's funny because when you mentioned executive coaching earlier, I've been part of the M series for maybe close to 7 years now or 5 years now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Barry Nemhard, he leads out each Sunday, or he has one of us lead it out to where we're getting executive coaching in real time. And we're going anywhere from like, I think before it used to be like 6 in the morning to 10 or so. And now we moved it a little bit like 8 to 10 or 8 to 12.
Hmm.
And it's one of those where it's like one to one, each person being able to tap in with a group of men that, again, faith, believing in God.
Yep. Yep.
And it's that one of the things that I learned from the group is that money is a tool and not just seeing it as like, oh, this number of like, oh, you've got to make six figures or you've got to be a millionaire. But then going back to the psychology of money, it's that the feelings you have about money are stemmed from where you grew up, how money was talked about or not talked about in your home. If things are always a scarcity, a lack, or the position that you have, that might be what's coloring your view of money. But then if you view it as like, okay, in the same way that you can trust in your limited mindset or your
Mm.
lack, you have to, you can also trust in an abundance. And it's not talking to yourself into a delusion of being like, oh, let me manifest this, manifest that. But it goes back to that there's life and death in the power of your tongue. But coming back to
Amen.
the Miles Monroe piece about understanding, is that understanding is only comes about when you have like an intimate relationship with what it is that you're learning. Like it's one thing to sit down, learn, be talked to, but until you can
Apply
make
it.
that knowledge applied exactly,
Hmm.
then it makes sense. Because it's like,
That's right.
I did the counseling and I went through the sessions and like I've listened to books and things, and it's like you're just getting
Right.
information, getting information, getting
Right. Right.
information.
Right.
But then when you're put under pressure, if you can't remember that information or how to use it, it doesn't
It
really
was a waste of
matter.
time. It was a
Right,
waste
right,
of
right.
time. Yep.
So
Yep.
then it's like kind of like if your wife says, it's like when you're getting frustrated, it's like you got all these books, you've been doing all this reading, like
Oh,
it's time
yeah.
it's time to
It's
show up.
exactly what she says it too. Yep.
It's
Yep.
time to start using that. And it's like
Yep.
when you're confronted with it, there is that knee-jerk reaction of like,
Hmm.
man, you hitting low, you hitting
Yeah.
below the belt there. But then
That's
it's
right.
like
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
then it's like, okay, like this is coming from someone that I trust, or even if
Yep.
it's someone that you think may be your enemy, it's like, is there a truth in that? And like,
That's right.
what can I get from that?
That's right.
But like,
Yep.
really, that focus of like, this is the definition of understanding, and this is how you can make peace with what it is that you know. Because like, different people can read the Bible and they can get interpretations, or
Yes.
you can read like a news article, or I think they do this
Hmm.
many times where like bias gets introduced, or like you can
Hmm.
be sitting on a jury and 12 people hear the same story and then you come to different conclusions.
That's
So
right.
it's all
Our
about that.
minds, that's right. Our minds are wired different. Jim
Yeah.
Quick proved that. Jim Quick wrote a book called Limitless, which is a phenomenal book if nobody's ever read it. And, he talks about, a lot of our memorization and how we perceive certain areas and certain things
Mm,
and how we can learn quick. So it's a phenomenal book. And I genuinely believe what you just said. So when that person, I don't know who it was by name,
mhm.
but when they said, knowledge is power, and I was just like, after this decade of just being a student and a student of discipline, or just a student of information,
Yeah.
I took away what he said. He says information changes situation, and he was absolutely correct.
Mhm.
Once you have it and you apply it, it changes this whole situation.
Yeah.
It gives it a whole new meaning, a whole different outlook. Well, understanding it can definitely be of a horse of a different color, because
Mm,
every single person is wired mentally different. Like our whole biological system is different. Nobody is wired the same. God did not intend us to be like that.
yeah.
So it's very, very um, flow. I genuinely believe that, when my wife points those things out, it's an absolute affirmation to say, hey, get back to where you just started.
Mm,
You have to get back to what you know and what you're
right.
grounded in.
Right.
And
Right.
so and I love it because it always definitely takes me back, and I'm thankful for it, even though at the moment, yes, sometimes as a human, as a
Mhm.
flesh, we're like, why does my wife always got to be right? You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like, why does she got to be right this morning? So, yeah, it's good though. But definitely, I think that all people on Earth, we get to a point where we get to that crossroad where understanding becomes something that we were lacking. And
Right.
I believe genuinely for the last decade of asking God for that specific ingredient has truly made me a better husband, a better father, and a better teacher on
Mm,
planet Earth, and most importantly, a better steward. So having understanding where people are coming from during that moment. I
yeah.
might not understand that feeling or that emotion
Mhm.
to some degree, or that perspective to some degree, but being of an understanding mind, that's a new beginning for a lot of people once you get that, once you actually ask God for that. I mean, think back to King Solomon. That's exactly what he asked for.
Yeah.
He didn't ask for gold, even though it came,
Yeah.
but he asked for wisdom and understanding, which in biblical terms, they were two different spirits. He called him a kinswoman and thy sister.
Mm.
He actually gave them names.
Yeah.
Like that right there. I mean, when you it's like saying, hey, you. I don't when kids say that, anybody say that, I don't respond
Mm.
until I hear Mr. Sagasta or Coach Sagasta, then I
Yeah.
respond. So
Right.
having that name has a lot of understanding.
Right.
Not having a name, there's no understanding behind
Mm.
so it's yeah, like I said, there is something about it that definitely drives my soul to want to know more about it and to
Yeah.
want to use it in every single day in every aspect you can. So yeah, that's good, man. I love
Yeah.
understanding.
What's interesting about that is like I listened to someone kind of do a deep dive on King Solomon, and I guess
Hmm.
the thing it was kind of off-putting at first, but it caught my attention obviously with their thumbnail on YouTube, and there's like
Yeah.
Solomon eventually practiced witchcraft, and I was like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? And the gentleman, I guess he says that he was a I guess he's practiced being a doctor, and then he's done a deep dive into the Bible and the books going back about the past 7 years of his life.
Okay.
And a lot of the things that he tied to were like things that I'd heard from different teachers and different things. And I'm
Hmm.
like, he has a strong understanding of what he's talking about. But the thing that was interesting because it's like you look at when someone tells you a story, you look at the beginning, the middle, and the end. And it's
Exactly.
like you always look at like it doesn't matter how you start, but it matters how you finish. And it's like
Always.
we praise Solomon for how he started, but then the more I hear like deeper dives in the story, I realize that I don't really know the story. Like a lot of times growing up, I
Mm-hmm.
kind of like glossed over the stories. And even as I go
Hmm.
back and read them now, and I'm like, I didn't know that this was tied in here. Like knowing like the story of Noah and like the misplaced curse. And then you have
Yeah, yeah,
that might be something tied into Beowulf. And then like
yeah.
seeing
Hmm.
that ancient history they're all like one in the same, but as different people decide to like pick and choose what they want to get out of it, then it starts to like fall apart or it doesn't make sense. But like once you go back into it, but the reason I bring up Solomon was that like he was blessed with the wisdom that he asked from God, but it's that over time he kind of forgot and then he started to go astray. And then when he tried to get back to where he was, he started going about things the wrong way, in short. And I was
Hmm.
like, wow, okay. It's not like the thumbnail, the video, and things like that is not to say, oh, like Solomon was a bad guy in the end, so you shouldn't follow anything that he says. It's like everybody in the Bible is a flawed human, but it's
Right.
like through all their flaws, it's like for some reason the creator of all things decides to still use them. So it's like
Yeah.
we can't make the excuse that oh like this person's uh what did you say a gigolo or
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah,
whore
yeah,
or
yeah,
this
yeah.
or that. It's like
Womanizer. Right, right, right.
right. It's like, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
all those people have always existed.
Yeah,
And
that's
it's
right.
like there's nothing new under the sun. And
That's right.
sometimes it's like I guess what they say is like what's your where your what you focus on like
We, where your energy, yeah, where your energy goes, that's where your energy will flow to that
right,
to that
right,
degree. Yeah, yep, yep.
right, right. So it kind of goes back to that thing of like whatever you believe to be true will
Hmm.
be true. Like if you think
Hmm.
that as the seasons change, you're going to be sad, like the sun's going to go away, you're not going to be able to do this, you're not going to be able to
Hmm.
do that.
Hmm.
You keep telling yourself that negative talk, and it's a
That's right.
self-fulfilling prophecy.
That's right.
But
Yeah.
then if you find yourself saying, okay, maybe this didn't happen this week, but I'm going to make an effort I
So
didn't
there you
work
go.
out, but I'm going to
Yeah,
go
yeah.
for a walk this morning.
Right,
And
right.
it's like, hey, that's enough for now. Or if I can't get a full workout in, maybe I'll chop down a tree, or like maybe I'll put my energy somewhere else to be like,
Right.
okay, I know that my attention it needs to be focused and it needs to be forward moving. I can
Hmm.
reflect on my past and put to bed things that are like looking at some old college notes and be like, okay, well, I haven't used this to this point, but I have to trust that I do have an
Hmm.
understanding of what I learned and where I
Yeah,
can
yeah,
get the
yeah.
information. So it's like if I'm not going to go back and reteach myself, I've got to think differently and find a way to move forward. It's like
Right.
I shouldn't have to, maybe this sounds backwards, but it's like I shouldn't have to go back to 2008, 2010 to learn what I need in 2024.
Hmm.
But then again, that's the power of a book. Like if something is worthwhile to be written down, it can be revisited at any time and to get the
Awesome. Yep.
information that you need from it and apply that information in the correct
Yep.
way.
Yep. Yeah. And it's remarkable. Thinking back on what your opening statement about King Solomon. There's literally from my research, the Ethiopian Bible has
Mm,
most of the recordings, but the New King James and King James only have 32 chapters when he clearly expresses in Ecclesiastes that there were literally over 3,000 writings from King
mm.
Solomon. So he was a writer.
Yeah.
He was definitely a writer, and so was Marcus Aurelius and many other great emperors throughout history. One of the things that I definitely learned a lot from him was, you know, not to fall apart in the end.
Mm,
Get the wisdom, get understanding, use them, and but don't fall apart in the end. No matter what comes your way, don't
mm,
fall apart. And that's I mean, you can't go to Amazon and find a book on the worst human being on earth, how to be the worst, how to live the most corrupt, how to it just there's not one book on that.
mm,
I know because I've researched, I've looked for the person that is not successful or not achieved great anything, but has just stayed failure, 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 failure all the life and then committed suicide or just died in the grave.
mm,
I haven't found a book like that because there's not one that exists. So, well, that's one thing that I definitely take away from Keith Solomon. He wrote this book, and as you were expressing to in my perspective and what I've learned is
mm,
that if every single story that we have run across, even one of my favorites is Job. Job, was given this opportunity to have life, and yet God told the devil, "Hey, use him, but I
mm,
guarantee you, don't touch him." Like he warned the devil, don't literally take his life. You can do anything to him. He won't curse me. That's how I know this individual. He
mm,
has the most prestigious heart, and everything was taken from him, but he never cursed God, even though his wife told him to.
mm.
You know what I mean? But he didn't do that. So I look at these areas as some of the greatest stories on planet Earth because a lot of the great teachers and a lot of the great books that I've read here in our home, and including some of the great speakers around the world, they have used some of those stories to tell their message
Mm.
and to really inspire and ignite people. You don't hear of people using those messages and saying, I'm still a failure. I still stuck in life. I still have five marriages and a bunch of kids from around, no, you don't hear those stories
Right.
and they don't really exist. So I love hearing even the downfall of stories because it teaches you a vital lesson not to go down that road,
Yeah.
and I think that's equally important as the information in the beginning.
Yeah. That's a great point because it's like if you're really seeking to understand, like you'll find the right information because it's
Hmm.
like on the one hand you can get hung up on, well, this doesn't have this, but then
Hmm.
you lose what it does have. And you kind of, okay, are you really seeking the information to move forward, or are you just looking for something to justify your thought in the moment and to kind of like self-gratify, like, oh yeah,
Yep.
good for me.
Yep.
Let me pat
Yep.
myself on the back.
And that's a narcissist. Yeah, by any means, you can't do that. Yeah, it shouldn't be. Shouldn't
Yeah.
be done. It's not good.
Well, I guess one of the things that is interesting is that like in not having sought out a lot of Solomon's writings outside the Bible, but like you spoke
Hmm.
about Proverbs, like reading
Hmm.
some of the Proverbs and seeing the way that they're written as like statements and different things like that. It's like some of them it's taking me a while to kind of wrap my head around, but the ones that kind of stick out and resonate, I'm like, that does make sense. And then things that didn't make sense before, it's like, huh, okay. Like
Hmm.
if when I decide to zero in on something and just be like, okay, I'm gonna read this right now, and once I read it, I'm gonna leave it, but I'm not gonna run to find something else. And then whatever
Right.
resonates, it'll resonate maybe at the end of the day, at the end of the week. I don't know, but I'll let it kind
Hmm.
of marinate for a while.
Marinate in there. Yep. Yep. Yep.
And the part where you were talking about like having wisdom and understanding is like
Hmm.
sisters or a relative. Like I read that not too long ago, and I was like, huh, I wonder. It's like I think about like how I relate to my sisters, and I'm like,
Hmm.
maybe I could do a better job, or maybe I can think differently on this because I'm like, if I treat this thing, this
Hmm.
understanding or this wisdom the same way that I treat my sisters, it's like, do I really care? Do I check in? Do I like, do I listen? Or do I
Hmm.
kind of want to do my own thing and just be like, eh, it'll
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
okay.
Right.
Like
Right. Right.
on to the next one.
Right.
But it's like,
Yeah. Right.
okay, like I've got
Yeah.
something to, I've got some meat to chew on now. Like
Yeah.
I've gotten past the bones and it's like, okay, it's
Yeah.
different. It's different.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I catch myself at times, drifting off and I guess not rewriting it, but I guess putting it into put correlating what sometimes Solomon is saying. And like I said, for the last decade, I've been reading that book every single day. And
Hmm.
I've got pretty much most of, I would say about half of it, if not a little over half,
Yeah.
just memorized in mind. And that's, there's even with saying that, there are still areas where I read and I go, huh. And I'll sit here for a moment and reflect on that. And sometimes that moment turns into like almost a minute or two or a minute and a half, and I'm still like, okay, that actually applies to today.
Mm.
Like I could see that today now.
Yeah.
Where and I start, putting the pieces together and puzzles together. Like this is man's heart. That makes sense. This is our carnal behavior and our actions, and
Mm.
that's again going back to what I said, and then putting the psychology into it too. Now the pieces start really connecting. And I'm like, wow, like
Yeah.
why wasn't I ever shown this years ago? You know what I
Mm.
mean? It wasn't the time. It
Right.
wasn't the time. So yeah, it's good. It's good.
Yeah. Well, I think it's great that we're coming to the understandings of what we know now and like you're doing and sharing the information earlier on with different grade levels and different students to see like, hey, this is
Hmm.
something that you can look forward to. This is something that's available to you. You have options. It's not
Yeah.
just rinse and repeat, but you get a choice in the making or a choice in how you go forward.
Yeah, by far. There's so much material out there. So many great teachers and experts that have written books, on an array of different subjects, concepts, and areas of life. That, one of the things that I'm a huge observer, and I'm so thankful for my years of being in geotech engineer was, you become very observant,
Mm.
and tying that into our leadership today is you got to be very observant. And Miles Monroe said, Miles Monroe, one of my favorite teachers, is you have to be observant of those people who call themselves leaders.
Mm.
And you really have to not just look at them, but listen to them. Are they saying and walking in the same beat as a leader? And so
Mm.
I am huge on that. And that's why I think ultimately in the end of all the content, all the material is having just a small circle,
Yeah.
being very selfish with what goes in.
Right.
That way, it doesn't ruin the temple. It doesn't ruin my path. It doesn't distort me from where I want to be and how I want to be there. So, it's yeah, there's so many opportunities for kids to learn. And unfortunately, there's not enough time. There
Right.
really isn't. Time is, one of the things that we battle with on a daily basis, but it's a time issue. Most
Yeah.
important is the time issue.
Well, if you got a second, you mentioned something that I'm like, huh, I don't think we've ever talked about that before, but take me back a little bit in time to when you got into geotech engineering.
Ah, man. So it was, I want to say 2000 and 2000 and no, it was a little, no, I take that back. It was 2000 because I was working two jobs. I was a assistant in the produce section at Smith's 423,
Hmm.
and a Kroger business. And then I worked for Western Technology, who's been around since 1955, still around today.
Hmm.
And I was brand new to it. I mean, I was didn't know anything about. I never even examined or never knew it. And I worked construction before with my brothers because my brothers and my dad were masons and carpenters. So I
Yeah.
grew up in that trade, but just never knew that there was a different side of construction. So geoteching, we have to survey the land. We test all the materials that go into the construction of every single skyscraper, building, home, industrial, residential, highways, airports. So I've traveled. I've had the wonderful opportunity of traveling and testing different materials and being on job sites and doing observational evaluations,
Hmm.
writing non-compliances for businesses. So when I hear of the word non-compliance, it always comes back to me. When I hear the word observation, it always comes back to me. When I hear
Hmm.
landscape and cut through on plans, blueprints. When I heard Dr. Martin Luther King give a speech of the blueprint of success or the blueprint of life to
Hmm.
a middle school in Philadelphia before he was assassinated. That story has for years resonated with me. For a decade, if not more, has resonated because of that word blueprint. And it always goes back to geotech because you have to look at blueprints, you have to go through, you have to look at the keys.
Right.
And so every single thing that I just mentioned are all details, and though that word details is what we use even in leadership. Like you have to be very detailed in leadership. You have to be very detailed when as a teacher, giving out your lesson plans and your curriculum map and all these other things and how you dress, for success. Those are all details.
Yeah.
So geoteching was one of those things. I worked as a geotech for 7 years. And as I said, I loved it. I
Hmm.
traveled. I had wonderful mentors. I had two great mentors, Monty. And Rob Nickerson. Um, they had been doing it for 25, 30 years. So they knew a lot. And then I had, of course, two brothers they were they were from Sudan, and it
Hmm.
was my very first time actually sitting down with them and having breaking bread
Hmm.
and learning their culture and understanding their culture. And even though they were Islamic, just
Hmm.
to sit down and actually, just to understand like that that culture of you don't use utensils, you use bread to eat the
Hmm.
food. I sat down and broke bread with them in their home. So taking my shoes off at the door, walking in, just a lot of different things that um, brought more meaning. So like I said, man, it was a wonderful experience. I loved it. I am very, very appreciative of that time spent
Yeah.
there because I learned a lot. I learned a lot about every single industry. Now, when I walk into buildings, I'm always looking. In fact, my wife and I went to a Notre Dame because I'm a huge Notre Dame fan.
Hmm.
My actual life mentor went to Notre Dame, played for Notre Dame, and so we went to the Coliseum in Los
Yeah.
Angeles to watch them play USC. And the first thing I do, again, when you've been in the field long enough, you
Hmm.
start looking around, you start looking at the structure, and I started noticing a lot of cracks. I
Hmm.
started noticing a lot. Of course, that stadium has been around for a lot of earthquakes. So
Yeah.
make a long story short, man, it was a wonderful experience. Wonderful experience.
That's awesome. It's funny because that's what I'm doing now, and that's been
Hmm.
doing for the past 3 years. And what's interesting is that when I was in school, I didn't think that it was one of those courses that was kind of interesting. I was like, oh, this is different, and like
Hmm.
there were different assumptions you had to make in order to move forward. So it wasn't just like straight math where it's just okay, A equals B every time, and it's
Nope.
like nope, like you don't know what the ground's going to do. You have to you have to interpret what kind of soil you're dealing with your hands, and
That's
then
right.
before you go to testing, because you got to optimize how you price things versus what's the information you get out from tests, and then
Hmm.
being able to relay that to a client to be like, hey, here's the best way that you can build on this ground. And it's like
Hmm.
like being on the line and checking in with some guys. It was wild to me when I think someone had asked a question and I'm sitting there like literally like, oh wow, like I'm being shown the answer because I'm literally at a brand new site that hasn't been built
Uh-huh.
before, and
Uh-huh.
you're getting in the dirt, like you're dealing with the foundation. It's like that's where it starts.
Yep.
Like
That's where
somebody
everything starts.
somebody had to come up with the plan, but it's like
That's right.
before they go to build the plan, they're like, hey, we need this. Like, what can you tell us about this? Like, is it
Yep.
good? Is water
Yep.
going to be a problem? Or,
Hmm.
earthquakes, like they're not so much in the southeast, but like in different areas, you still have to consider it. And then even looking at hurricanes now, and you look at like what's blown over, what's still standing. It's like I have an idea of like um, obviously like a signpost or something like that. Like,
Right, right, right,
was
right.
it installed correctly? But then other times it's like, well, things are going to do what it's Mother Nature's going to do what it does.
That's right.
But when you see things that are built right and kind of withstand, it's like somebody did a good job.
They did a phenomenal job. Yep, they did a phenomenal job. They tested everything. They made sure there's a casino in Las Vegas. I was working as a geotech back then,
Hmm.
and I was wanting to get into welding. I wanted to become a welding engineer, and so I
Hmm.
wanted to check welds and so beads and stuff like that. So I started learning. Got a big old huge book, and one of the old teachers and JR was his name, was another one of those mentors, but he was much more of a he was like he was the alpha male in the whole
Hmm.
company because he had been with the company for 25 or 30 years,
Yeah.
and he was very well rounded with state policies, federal policies, procedures, and I looked up to him too. But there was one casino in Las Vegas that definitely was unable,
Hmm.
ineffective to actually build to its fullest potential
Hmm.
because of the lack of welding
Hmm.
on one particular floor. So it goes to tell you again that job, why that is so important. Because if it's not checked, if there is no compliancy for that level, then
Yeah.
you can't continue to go up. And the same thing with the bottom ground. If we have no great soil,
Hmm.
then you have sinking ground. And
Yeah.
I've witnessed this with a building in our community, um, where they built it on a what is it called, a gravel pit,
Hmm.
and below the gravel pit was a water table, and so they had to fill in. It was just a massive. They brought in engineers from Spain to
Hmm.
help with this, geotechnical engineers. Even today, this was 20 years ago,
Yeah.
even today, they have seismic meters that test when the actual building is shifted. And
Hmm.
so it has shifted 20 years now. It has shifted 2 inches
Cool.
in 20 years.
Yeah.
So in the end, they have been using different tools and technology to keep it where it's at, because it's a multi-million-dollar industry. So
Hmm.
you don't want to just tear it down and rebuild somewhere else. It doesn't work like that.
Right.
So the investors don't believe in stuff like that. But nonetheless, man, yeah, it was a very fun time, very fun experience. I'm glad that you're still doing it. It's like I said, you can learn a lot, and who knows, you can open up your own establishment.
Yeah.
But it's a wonderful experience, wonderful tool.
Yeah. It's definitely teaches real life lessons where you're like, okay, I guess that of
Hmm.
course you get to deal with people everywhere you go,
Yeah,
you go with people.
absolutely.
But
Yeah.
it's like just seeing the things start from the beginning. It's like, wow, that's
Oh yeah.
pretty neat. That's pretty
Yep.
neat.
Yep. And you see the finished product, and then I worked. So going back to that industry, it's called Lowe's,
Mm,
and and I actually worked at Lowe's part time. And
mm,
I'll never forget sitting in the interview with the manager and the store director, and telling them that I worked as I'm in education. I was only working there part time until I
mm.
got my own little business going,
Yeah.
and so I worked there part time. And I remember in the interview I told him, I said, man, I remember doing the actual foundation for this building. I remember that back corner was one of those key issues that they were looking at. He said, "Oh yeah, we still have problems." He says, "In fact, we always try to recommend people not to walk back there." I was just like, "Are you serious?" Like, what? Like, yeah. Now I don't know if I want to work here. Yeah. So yeah, no, it was cool, but it was funny. There was only one employee that actually opened up the store that was still there today.
Yeah.
Everybody has brand, but it was just a wonderful opportunity. Yeah, and I'm thankful. Yeah, I learned some things. They Lowe's wanted to make me full time, and I just could not do that because I was trying to open up my own little handyman business, and then of
Mhm.
course working as a full time teacher. That just wasn't going to happen. So unfortunately, I
Right.
had to leave Lowe's and just continue on my path of being a good teacher and being a good steward and doing my own business when the weather cools down. I like to go back out and do my handyman business. It's
Yeah.
fun. I enjoy it.
Nice. So how can people get in touch with you? And as the year's wrapping up, what's one thing you're looking forward to?
Well, you could always contact me or get in hold of me or see what I'm doing on all social media platforms. The number one thing I always say is Google me. Just
Mhm.
Google me. That's all you got to do is Google my name, Coach Frank Sagasta, and you'll see everything else that there is. I mean, there's nothing to hide. As far as the end of the year, last quarter, I would definitely say finishing up some books that I have purchased. Um, I'm a huge advocate, a huge discipline advocate of learning. And every single month is a new book. And whether
Mhm.
it's two books, I try not to go over three books a month, but I have one thick book that I'm reading right
Mhm.
now. It's taking me 2 months to read, but in the process is finishing up, yeah, with 50 to 70 books this year.
Wow.
And being able to say that I've written a blog every single month. So number one, again, as we end this year, is making do with my goals. You
Mhm.
know, I put my Bible up here. Normally, I used to for years. I used to sit on the couch and read my Bible,
Mhm.
and then there were times where I would drift off. And so I
Mhm.
said, you know what? No, got to go back to where I started. Where I started waking up at 3:30 in the morning. I sat here at the kitchen table and I focused, sat up straight, worried about my posture, kept
Mhm.
that very, very in tune. So in the end, to that, I know it's a long answer, but in the end is staying true to your goals, what you said you were going to do,
Yeah.
and valuing those goals and understanding what those goals mean to you. So that's the end goal for this last quarter, and then getting ready for the new quarter. What that's going to bring, what new vision and new value we will have in 2025. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Preparing the mind and preparing the heart and spirit for the new year.
Awesome. I like it. It's always fun talking with you, Coach.
I appreciate it, brother. Likewise, man. Definitely. Thank you so much for the invite. It's been a minute. Definitely.
Yes, sir.
Gotta keep in touch, brother. Gotta keep in touch.
For sure. I'm gonna send you that video and yeah, definitely keep in touch because you've been
Okay.
on my mind a lot and I was like, yeah, probably reach out and just
Awesome, man.
see what you're up to.
Yeah, man. Like I said, teaching and being a father and a steward is the three things that I believe God has given me purpose on. So I just gotta stay congruent to that and keep on growing in those.
Awesome. Well, until next time.